if you're watching this, that means I've officially hit 2,000 subscribers. And in honor of this occasion, I thought I'd revisit my favorite channel as a kid, Disney XD. I've dedicated videos to Lab Rats and Crash and Bernstein. The former was my first review to really blow up, and the latter was my 1,000 subscribers special. And in those videos, I expressed my admiration for the network they came from. So for this milestone, I thought it'd be fitting to rank all of its full-length original series in one video. Yes, all of them. As listed under the original programming section of the former programming section of the list of programs broadcast by Disney XD Wikipedia article. Live action and animation, including all of the Marvel stuff. The only exceptions I'm making are Yin Yang Yo and Spectacular Spider-Man, since the former only premiered its last 9 episodes out of 65 on Disney XD after the rebrand from Toon Disney/Jetix, and the latter only debuted its second season out of 2 on Disney XD, so I think it'd be disingenuous to present those as Disney XD originals. And going by that logic, Gravity Falls would be on this list, but it aired its entire first season on Disney Channel before moving to Disney XD for its second and final, which allowed it to gain the momentum to continue flourishing even on Disney XD. Also, it would make the #1 spot very predictable. On the flip side, I think Milo Murphy's Law does qualify for this list, as it premiered in its entire first season on Disney XD before moving to Disney Channel for its second and final, is seen as a large contributing factor to its lack of popularity. Also, there's Wander Over Yonder, which aired only its first 8 out of 43 episodes on the main channel before moving to Disney XD for the remainder of its run. And Star Versus, which aired its first episode on the main channel as a sneak peek before moving to Disney XD for the rest of its first season, its entire second and third seasons, and only moving back to Disney Channel for its fourth and final season. So those 2 shows also count. You either failed because of Disney XD or succeeded in spite of it. I'm also only including shows before 2017, as that's when I feel the channel really started going downhill. Even with all those stipulations, it still leaves me with 32 shows to review. That's 1,662 episodes of television for me to watch. So let's dive right in. And if you're wondering, I watched each show in order of premiere day. And if you're wondering why I ripped off Shea Frillis for the thumbnail, don't worry, I'm also ripping off his format.
Disappointment in the game of life!
Gamer's Guide to Pretty Much Everything sucks
Ass!
Which should have been obvious from that title. Yeah, this is Gamer's Guide to Pretty Much Everything. It sounds like some crappy book you'd pick up from your Scholastic book fair, not an actual show made by humans. I guess that's a good place to start, the gaming aspect. It's just a gimmick. Yeah, they're on a gaming team, but most episodes have generic sitcom plots that have little or nothing to do with video games. They'll usually have a segment where it replicates a specific video game very poorly, and they have these quirky achievement blurbs at the bottom of the screen throughout, and a few gaming YouTubers guest star in season 1, but are severely underused. The main character runs a video blog which we see throughout each episode, but it doesn't add much. Every time he says gamers, I die a bit inside. Same whenever Wendell says wrecked. A lot of the humor feels more like it's laughing at gamers than with gamers. A far cry from something like Mighty Mad, which feels like it was made by actual comic book nerds. Why does every episode minus the pilot have "the" in the title? Shouldn't every episode be Gamer's Guide to blank? And dear God, is this show not funny. These jokes are as lazy and predictable as they come, and the theme song is god-awful dubstep trash. But what really makes this show unbearable is the characters. There's not a single likable one to be found. More than any other show on this list, never did I get the sense that they were actually friends. They're all completely miserable people who are even more miserable together. Connor is a blank slate protagonist who's whatever the situation calls for, which is often an egotistical douchebag. Franklin's whole character is that he's an unlikable loser, which, surprise, makes him an unlikable loser. He also awkwardly hits puberty between seasons. Ashley is the dumb blonde most of the time, which would already be annoying, but they can't even keep it consistent. Every one of them can be the dumbass if the joke calls for it, which makes her redundant. Eventually, the writers realized, hey, we we got a male and female lead, and so abruptly started teasing a romance in season 2. But the show ends with Connor friend-zoning her and she leaves for another team? Seriously? And yeah, this show ends on a cliffhanger, haha, screw you Gamers Guide. And Wendell is the absolute worst. He's Alan Diaz without anything that made him work. For one, his acting is horrible. I'm sorry, but none of these kids got it. But also, a character like Alan worked because 1, nobody else liked him, and 2, the other characters were decent people. Here, everyone's an asshole, so again, he's redundant. And they're not exaggerated assholes you can laugh at when they fail, just unpleasant people you don't like being around. And there's a few obnoxious side characters thrown in for good measure, like Janice. She's fat and lonely. Isn't that so funny? Boogie plays a character in season 1, you know, Tebow from iCarly. The writers asked, how can we make him ungodly annoying instead of funny? So they gave him a Jamaican accent, mom.
That's right. This show is now racist.
Bro thinks he's Falafel Phil. Darren Norris and Dana Snyder have recurring roles, both very funny people whose talents are completely wasted on this dumpster fire. I mean, for Christ's sake, the Thundermans utilize Dana Snyder better. It's hard for a show to get a 1 out of 10, but this earns it. I hate it with every fiber of my being, and pray there's nothing worse than this.
It makes me want to kill myself.
And I guess I have to address the elephant in the room, which is that the main actor for this show still died somewhat recently. None of my comments on this show are an attack on him as a person, which I really shouldn't have to clarify, but I know I'd get comments about it if I didn't, so there you go. Unfortunately, there's still quite a bit more crap to sort through before we get to the gold, so let's keep things moving.
Family Guy is written by manatees? Of course, it all makes sense now.
My only memory of Right Now Kapow is that one time I was talking to a classmate about different Disney XD shows, and he told me this was the worst show he'd ever seen. We were 8 years old. Needless to say, I was morbidly curious, and after watching every episode, I wouldn't go that far, but it's pretty damn close. The Wikipedia article makes some pretty bold comparisons, like the original Looney Tunes. What, because of the lack of continuity? The Looney Tunes still had consistent personalities, and, you know, they were actually funny.
This is more of an insult of the cartoons, more than anything.
Also Ren and Stimpy, which I don't really see, and Cartoon Network's Mad, which I kind of get, but that might just be because they're both sketch comedies with some creative overlap. Even Mad was at least funny half the time. The best way I can describe it is to imagine a show composed entirely of only the worst Family Guy cutaways. Yeah, it's that bad. It actually feels like it was written by manatees. The jokes are that effortless. Sketches built around the funny hypotheticals you might make with friends, like, wouldn't it be funny if when the prince went to kiss Snow White she had bad breath? Or what if instead of a fairy godmother, she was a fairy grandmother? Which should have just stayed as funny hypotheticals, because when you drag them out for a whole skit, the audience picks up on the joke quickly and gets sick of it. Especially when each episode has one skit that pops up 3 times. I think maybe it would have worked better if they just stuck to rapid fire sketches, because the best ones are the ones that last 30 seconds. And I haven't even mentioned the unappealing character designs and below average flash animation. This honestly might be the most baffling show on this list. With all the other bad ones, I can put them into 2 categories: soulless corporate products and misconceived passion projects. Right Now Kapow doesn't feel like a labor of love, but also doesn't feel like a show with mass appeal. Its humor is very normo, but any normo would be turned off by its art style. It really is an enigma. Who at Warner Brothers thought we needed an animated sketch comedy for kids that looks like this in the year of our Lord 2016? And why did Disney agree with them? We may never know. You can copy and paste a lot of what I said about Gamer's Guide for I'm in the Band, and in some ways it's worse. Often they'll point blank explain the jokes after they happen, which they sometimes did on Gamer's Guide, but not as much. I don't understand. That's gotta be rule 1 of comedy, and they frequently break it. There's also a lot more story problems, like characters behaving irrationally just for the sake of forced drama, or conflicts going unresolved. Though it being less competent almost makes it better. More of a fascinating train wreck. The characters aren't as despicable as in Gamer's Guide, side, but still really annoying. Mainly the Iron Weasels. They're treated so interchangeably. Sure, they try to give them unique traits. Derek's vain. Burger's fat. And he farts. Ash is dumb, but they're all dumb, so what makes him stand out? At the end of the day, they're all the same childish, hyperactive numbskull. On the flip side, Trip is just kind of a generic boy protagonist, and Izzy's one joke is that she wants to be famous, which isn't funny. This show has some really obnoxious running gags, and she also isn't as prominent as her place in the theme song would tell you. But one thing I'll compliment this show over most on this list is that the male and female lead are friends and stay friends with no hint of romance. There might be even more wasted talent here than in Gamer's Guide. Again, particularly the Iron Weasels, I could tell from the rare funny moments that they're actually funny people, except Ash, who delivers every line in the worst way possible.
You hear that, Dad?
Your dad's not dead.
I know, but I don't have a cell phone.
They probably figured, hey, they're funny guys, we don't have to actually write anything funny for them. What really gives it the edge over Gamer's Guide, though, is the music. It's actually not bad at all. Yeah, they kinda sound like lost loaded diaper songs, but at least they're catchy. The theme song is honestly one of the best on this list. The one thing keeping it a 2 out of 10 instead of a 1. Still better than Fresh Beat Band of Spies.
What do you think? A spaceship is just gonna appear out of the blue?
Are you kidding me? The same bit?
Lego Star Wars The Freemaker Adventures feels like Baby's first Star Wars show, except it's somehow worse than all but one of the actual Baby shows I've reviewed. It's boring. The story is rushed and the characters are annoying. I can enjoy an incompetent villain, but when every antagonist is this pathetic, it completely eliminates tension. Also, they're not funny. Palpatine is funny in the movies
because he's such a ham, but the plot takes him seriously.
So when you turn him into an actual comic relief, you lose what made him funny in the first place. They also do a lot of cheeky references to the parts of Star Wars that everyone already references, which kind of shows the problem with making a comedic Star Wars show, which is that Star Wars is perhaps the most overdone parody there is. Any joke you can make about it, someone has probably already made it. You can't bring anything new to the table. The animation is okay, but like most Lego animations that aren't the Lego movie, they cheat by not having everything be made out of Lego pieces. The only saving grace is that Dana Snyder voices Jabba's cousin, Grabala. Sounds really stupid, because it is, but this is the best use of Dana Snyder on this list because they really let him ham it up. In general, this show has a way better voice cast than it deserves. It sucks.
He turns himself into a pickle. Funniest shit I've ever seen.
It's hard to believe that Pickle and Peanut is a Disney show. I could get Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network, but I can't picture a cartoon this strange and niche being greenlit by Disney's executives. Hell, I think it would have been better off on Adult Swim, since at least there it would have had a better chance finding an audience that could appreciate its humor. As is, while it is surprising how much they were allowed to get away with, it still feels held back by being a Disney show. Very much controlled chaos. My only guesses are that this was an attempt to appeal to the internet generation, or maybe to compete with Cartoon Network, since it does share a lot in common with regular show in particular. It's about two dude bros who think they're cool but are actually lame. Early on, they often rap what they're doing like Mordecai and Rigby do, and instead of they say and instead of working at a park, they work at a grocery store. They try to ground it like regular show by having Pickle and Peanut be teenagers trying to fit in with the cool crowd, with most episodes starting in a somewhat grounded place before taking a left turn into the surreal. But in regular show, the weird things that happen always feel properly built up to, and at least run on an internal logic. While here, it always just feels random for the sake of it. The strongest aspect of regular show is the characters, a strength that isn't found here. Unlike Mordecai and Rigby, who have very distinct personalities that change organically with time,
Pickle and Peanut often feel completely indistinguishable. Pickle's also voiced by John Heder,
aka Napoleon Dynamite,
who I swear is doing his best Patrick Star impression.
What's up with the headband? You don't even know how to play tennis!
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
and while regular show's supporting cast are all well-developed characters characters in their own right, except high fives. Here, the side characters are all one-note gag machines, and the humor doesn't compensate for the weak stories and characters. You know how in cartoons like SpongeBob, they'll sometimes have live-action cutaways? Here, they do it so often that it loses any effect it could have. They also run this joke into the ground.
Action, action. Duck face, science, science, chemistry, magic, magic, magic.
And of course, you get your cheap innuendos. Come to think of it, the title characters themselves might be an innuendo. A lot of it feels like anti-humor, and it can get pretty dark, except I never laugh. I'm just like, well, that just happened. Once you get used to the show's humor, you get numb to it. It's all just noise to you. The theme song and credits set the tone very well. Random nonsense trying to be hip. The music in the show itself was done by Brad Breek, who also did the music for Gravity Falls, and I'm not convinced he composed a single new background track for this show. It all sounded reused from Gravity Falls. This show's references consist of 90s references that no kid would get, and very timely references that feel pandering. And there's also a lot of frightening imagery for kids, and the animation is stylistic suck. Pickle and Peanut being awkwardly photoshopped, and all the humans being weirdly deformed. So really, it's a show that feels like it was only made for the people who made it, so I do respect it more than the shows ranked below it.
Just don't put it on TV next time, okay?
I also liked the character of 90s Adventure Bear, and how he parodies Disney afternoon shows, even if I wish they committed more to the art style. His episodes are the only ones I recommend, because they provide a juxtaposition between the stories and humor that most of the show is lacking. It kind of says a lot that my favorite episodes are the ones that feature none of the main characters.
Thanks, Spider-Man.
I went into Ultimate Spider-Man with pretty low expectations, and watching it, I'm surprised. It's worse than I imagined. Never did I think a show could have this many painful quips, and this much unnatural dialogue. I apologize to Aaron Stone. And I certainly didn't expect a Spider-Man show to have this many Family Guy-style cutaways. Except unlike Family Guy, they're never funny. Like, ever. Spider-Man also breaks the fourth wall, usually to explain the obvious. And this show was blatantly not made to be binged, as almost every episode starts with Spider-Man recapping information you'd already know if you'd watched up to that point. This feels made for little kids. But this was Disney XD, which wasn't made for little kids. Drake Bell isn't awful as Spider-Man, but I can't help but hear Drake Parker, and it doesn't help that Spider-Man kind of sucks in this show. Not just because he never shuts up,
but he's petty, he's rash, he's egotistical.
Spider-Man obviously always makes mistakes, but here, it almost does feel like Drake Parker in that spider suit. Just if that spider bite also sucked out all his wit and charm. All just so he can learn some on-the-nose morals, which get very repetitive. Again, baby show. And they don't make much of an effort to differentiate Spider-Man and Peter Parker personality-wise. Though, as the show continues, we see Peter Parker less and less. Isn't that half the appeal? His teammates aren't much better, with Nova just copy and paste everything I said about Spider-Man, which means they're constantly bickering. White Tiger is the girl, which of course means she's also the wet blanket. Funnily enough, they're voiced by Logan Miller and Caitlin Taylor-Love, the male and female leads of I'm in the Band, a show of similar quality. The limited voice cast really shows. There are times you have Drake Bell voicing extras who aren't even his race.
Sorry, still closed.
Iron Fist's thing is that he always waxes philosophical, which gets old.
And I think they forgot to give Luke Cage a personality.
And I really don't buy the found family dynamic they try to sell us. When it comes to the other characters, they're pretty much what you'd expect from them. Except it's the 2010s, so MJ and Aunt May have been girl bossified, despite still constantly being saved by men. I believe this is what Nostalgia Critic called dumbasses in distress. There's also no romance between Peter and MJ, or any romance period, really. Maybe they didn't want to bog down their 7-year-old boy show with that stuff.
When Peter Parker appeared less, they also appeared less.
But they do come back near the end. Yeah, the last season is actually good. In terms of being the last season, that is. With them reintroducing a lot of characters from before they were
living on a bionic island.
Leading up to the finale, which includes almost all of the show's recurring recurring characters, meaning this show ends better than most on this list. The animation isn't great. This show is surprisingly reliant on CG, and it all looks plucked straight from the 90s. The show's more obnoxious qualities are toned down with time, but all that means is I went from feeling annoyed watching these episodes to feeling nothing. I was also surprised how many times they actually call him the Ultimate Spider-Man in this show, which gets cheesier every time. As for positives, well, J.K. Simmons returns as J. Jonah Jameson, which is cool, even if it means he has a minimized role, and if you drank every time they did this joke.
A creature that may be the most dangerous thing to ever hit this city.
Is it just me, or has JJJ moved on to a new target? Catch.
But who's really to blame? The only menace actually seen at the blaze was the wall-crawling Spider-Man!
You'd be dead. Tom Kenny as Doc Ock is fun. It's rare you see him voice an actually serious villain. And Stan Lee is a recurring character, the school janitor turned principal who's actually a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, which is cute and makes this the second Disney XD show where the best character's named Stan. And even more coincidentally, they both have an episode called Stand By Me. But even with those characters, it's still only a 3 out of 10. It's impossible not to compare this to the Marvel cartoons that followed it, so just this once, I'm breaking my actual ranking order to go in chronological order for narrative purposes.
Earth's mightiest heroes, joining forces under one roof
to face the challenge of everyday life.
I didn't know what to expect from Avengers Assemble, besides that it would be bad. But would it be as annoying as the first half of Ultimate Spider-Man, or as boring as the second half? Well, a little bit of both, but for the most part, it's really boring. This was made to capitalize off the MCU, so of course, all the heroes have to quip. And yeah, a lot of the dialogue is laughably bad, at least at first.
But you get used to it.
The characters aren't as annoying, besides maybe Hawkeye, but still come across like total weenies a lot of the time, with morals that are just as on the nose and repetitive. Which again makes me wonder who this is for. It's Disney XD, so you think it'd be for 6 to 11-year-old boys who want to feel badass, but it feels like it's written as baby's first superhero show. And the animation is similarly below average. The villains form cabals. They use the word cabal, which, you know, has since become associated with far-right conspiracies. It's less bad than Ultimate Spider-Man, but also less good than Ultimate Spider-Man. It lacks the most obnoxious aspects like the cutaways and incessant fourth wall breaking and exposition dumps,
but fails to replace them
with anything that would make it stand out for better or worse, and also lacks that show's redeeming qualities.
J.K. Simmons only cameos a couple times early on. They saved their Stan Lee cameo for the very last season.
And while the cast is all around solid, there's no standout performance like Tom Kenny as Doc Ock. Also in the last season, they changed the art style and it somehow looks even worse. And also unlike Ultimate Spider-Man, this show doesn't really have a proper finale. So I would say Avengers Assemble is in fact worse than Ultimate Spider-Man.
Probably even I'm in the band.
Hulk get itchy right!
Now this is more like it. Instead of just being Ultimate Spider-Man but less bad, giving it no identity of its own, Hulk and the Agents of Smash is a similar but distinctive brand of awful. Again, no Family Guy cutaways, but the fourth wall breaks are replaced by the show being framed as a web show, which doesn't really add anything besides occasional interview segments, which are rarely actually insightful. And much like Ultimate Spider-Man, each team member manages to be annoying in their own ways. A-Bomb is a millennial fanboy voiced by Seth Green, Scar talks like a caveman, and She-Hulk's the girl on a superhero team, so of course she has to be the tomboy who rejects everything feminine, forcing the Hulk to be the voice of reason, which is a very strange role for him. And the found family messaging is even more obnoxious here. I appreciate that they decided to at least change the art style a little bit this time, but the animation is even worse.
Frequently, large portions of the frame will be taken up by black, and there's no pattern to it. It's clearly just a cost-cutting measure.
Even if it was an artistic choice, it doesn't look good. At least J.K. Simmons appears a bit more frequently here. And the Stan Lee cameo, he's the mayor. Brilliant. And surprisingly, this show also has a real finale. It's still really bad though. Like Avengers Assemble,
it can be kind of so bad it's good at first, particularly their overuse of the word smash.
But it's the kind that quickly wears off and becomes boring. Not as boring or bad as that show or I'm in the Band, but still worse than Ultimate Spider-Man and Pickle and Peanut, which need I remind you are also really bad.
We're going on a trip in our favorite rocket ship.
I don't want to talk about another crappy Marvel cartoon.
I hate this. Look at that. That's so lame. This is idiotic. I really hate this. This is so stupid.
I mean, what do you want me to say at this point? It's no different from the rest of them. It's boring. The dialogue is bad. The animation sucks. The characters are bland and or annoying. Whenever an interesting idea comes up, it's completely wasted. I feel nothing but pity for all these poor writers and animators who are forced to make the same damn show 4 times.
They probably wanted to make shows that were
good and unique. I pin all the blame on Disney for this. It's clear they barely threw any money at these and didn't give them much creative freedom. And why would they? They're just glorified commercials for the MCU. Gotta make them all the same, just like the MCU. Except I still doubt that anyone but the smallest of children would actually be sold on Marvel by these shows. And if they wanted this to be a shared universe, they failed because there's no continuity between them. At what point in Avengers Assemble would there have been a window of time for Hulk to start his Agents of Smash? Yes, it's worse than Avengers Assemble, if only by virtue of being the fourth one of these terrible shows I had to watch. And thankfully the last, praise God.
Twins.
Pair of Kings is about as charmless and unfunny as I'm in the Band or Gamer's Guide, and has about as much forced drama as I'm in the Band.
And also has a terrible theme song. But it does have the courtesy of having an actually decent character in the form of Lanny, which I value more. He's the only one with a well-defined personality, and Ryan Ochoa is very likable and funny, even if his dynamic with his fish is just kind of a worse version of Max Funderman and Dr. Colosso. And when I'm negatively comparing you to the Fundermans, you know you're in trouble. And the twins always being ignorant of his true nature got old quickly and sometimes felt very forced. James Hong also has a recurring role and he's fun to watch. And also had a recurring role and I'm in the Band? What the hell? The rest of the cast is just bland. The Kings feel even more interchangeable than the Weasels. Like you could switch most of their lines around and it wouldn't make a difference. The one thing that makes Mitchell Musso stand out is he's constantly making unwanted advances on the female lead, which is annoying, especially when they try to tease an actual romance in some episodes.
Merry Christmas, King Brady.
This is stupid! This is stupid! 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 Stupid!
Also, this show takes place on a magical island, which means way more obvious sets, crappy effects, and weird racial implications. It's not as mean-spirited as Gamer's Guide or as annoying as I'm in the Band, but it is really boring. And while I'm in the Band had funny actors telling the worst jokes you've ever heard, this show felt like it could have benefited from better actors who could elevate these very dull scripts. Case in point, in season 3, after his DUI, they replaced Mitchell Musso with the completely uncontroversial Adam Hicks, who I'm sure will never do anything illegal or immoral ever. Jokes aside, even if the in-universe explanation is pretty dumb and contrived, I think it actually slightly improves after this, largely due to Adam Hicks just being the more naturally charismatic and funnier actor than Mitchell Musso. And they also don't carry over his crush on Michaela, which makes him less unlikable and annoying, and more consistently portray Boomer as the smarter of the duo, instead of just having them be one two-headed moron. So yeah, season 3 is actually passable, but that's after 2 seasons of mostly boredom. Some of those episodes drag. It went from a 2 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10, so I can't put it any higher than this.
Pocket Ninja!
Randy Cunningham kind of blows. The animation isn't up to par with most other Flash cartoons on this list, but I like the style, which makes sense since the characters were designed by Jonan Vasquez, who also did Invader Zim. The writing also reminded me a bit of Zim, with how stupid they portray humanity as. But while in Zim that contributed to the kind of show it was, a very cynical one, here, more often than not, it feels like the characters are made dumb just for the sake of its cliche plots. It's a very formulaic Monster of the Week show. Randy will be confronted with a problem, he'll read from the Nomicon, usually annoying Howard, misinterpret its advice, make the problem worse, allowing for a villain to attack, only to save the day by correctly interpreting the Nomicon. Rinse and repeat. It's exhausting. It doesn't help that I don't care for the main duo. They're your typical pair of
totally gnarly dudes, man.
Ben Schwartz's voice is already annoying, and here he really likes to do a Jerry Seinfeld impression for some reason.
That's exactly how I do it!
Howard in particular is one of those best friend characters who's almost always a complete cunt, to the point you wonder why the main character tolerates him, and why they're still friends when most episodes have them arguing over something minuscule.
The show also almost always sides with Howard, with Randy almost always being the one who apologizes.
Even though at best they're usually both in the wrong. Like a lot of kids' cartoons of the era,
this show has its own lingo that all the characters use.
Which, while it could be funny and charming in some shows, in shows like this it just feels try-hard. Best represented by that god-awful theme song.
But as awful as that theme song is,
the songs in the show itself actually aren't that bad. I mean, you can tell they aren't supposed to be good, they're all parodies, but for songs that aren't supposed to be good, they're not that bad. Which makes sense since the music was done by Brad Breek again.
I guess Disney didn't know any other composers at the time.
And again, I recognize the number of background tracks that are also used in Gravity Falls. At least the villains are kind of fun. Corrupt businessman Hannibal McFist, voiced by John DiMaggio, his gay underling, voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, and the mastermind behind it all, the evil sorcerer, voiced by Tim friggin' Curry, in the first season at least. Some of the other side characters, like the principal or the bully, are also quite funny,
but just as many are completely obnoxious.
This show can be really funny when it wants to be, but too often it falls back on
cheap gross out, Butch Hartman style subversions, and running gags that aren't funny to begin with. Oh, and it's a superhero show, so plenty of quips.
When I think the humor is its best at its most surreal. When the show becomes more serialized, it does get more interesting,
but you have to sit through tons of forgettable crap to get there. Also, it ends on a cliffhanger.
It's your pretty typical bad cartoon of the era, but like Pickle and Peanut, it gets credit for feeling like someone actually wanted to make it, unlike most shows below it. Sorry if you like it, but I didn't care for it.
What is this, a crossover episode?
For my old Lab Rats review, I was only able to stomach 2 episodes of Lab Rats Elite Force before deciding that was enough. But after all the crap I've had to sit through for this marathon, 15 episodes is nothing. I'm actually glad I waited until now to watch every episode, because you really do have to be a fan of both shows to understand all its problems. And I might just be desensitized, but honestly, it's not that bad, just heavily flawed. Right off the bat, the fact that Tyrell Jackson Williams and Spencer Boldman declined should have been the first red flag not to go through with this, especially with Donald Davenport also being in a reduced role due to Hal Sparks being promoted to director. Leo, Adam, and Donald were the main sources of comedy in Lab Rats, with Bree and Chase largely existing as foils, and the former three also had the better comedic chops. Billy Unger works fine as a straight man, but sometimes they'll give him these over-the-top reactions, and I cringe.
What the heck are shapeshifters?
Then you have the fact that because Lab Rats was their golden boy, Disney put this spin-off entirely in the hands of the Lab Rats team, who clearly didn't watch Mighty Men, which would be fine if they weren't now writing a half sequel sequel to Mighty Men. The result is a show whose premise spits in the face of anyone who cared about Mighty Men. Instead of continuing Mighty Men's story, Oliver's mom was defeated and jailed off screen, and we get the bombshell that the Mighty Men hospital was destroyed, represented by a picture of a destroyed building with the Mighty Men logo plastered over it, revealing that the Lab Rats writers didn't even know the premise of Mighty Med, since the Mighty Med hospital was hidden inside a Normo hospital, and also implies that most of the beloved side characters from Mighty Med were killed, since not once are any of them even mentioned in this show. We just get Lab Rats characters in the main three from Mighty Med, which limits the comedic possibilities even more because Oliver and Skylar were two of the less comedic characters from Mighty Men, and their characterizations take a big hit as well. Oliver's crush on Skylar goes from a little creepy to full-on obsessive and possessive, to the point where it's his most prominent trait, made worse by how instead of being mostly oblivious to his advances, now Skylar is openly disgusted by him, except when she enables him, and they make him so pathetic. Same with Chase. The only episode I watched besides the pilot last time was Follow the Leader, because Perry was in it. I was really down on it back then, but now I consider it one of the better episodes. It's nice to see Chase be humbled and step down as mission leader, but he continues being a narcissistic prick throughout the rest of the show, so what was the point? They do at least stop with the body shaming jokes. Skylar becomes mostly interchangeable from Bree. They're both just the girls. Skylar didn't have much of a personality in Mighty Med besides general
nice,
but that could have actually been a good point of contrast, the optimism of the Mighty Med trio against the cynicism of Bree and Chase. Now the only distinguishing factor between Skylar and Bree is that Skylar makes quips about her home planet, which I already didn't think was that funny when they did it on Mighty Med. There's other weird retcons too, like in one episode we meet Skylar's supposed mentor and first friend, but she was never established before, so it falls flat. She does at least get her powers back. I'm glad they tied up that loose end. The joke writing is just as stale as it was by the end of Lab Rats.
You're the one knocking over babies. I wasn't knocking over babies, I was barreling into a baby. There's a difference.
In most Lab Rats and Mighty Med episodes, there were cool sci-fi or fantasy concepts to pull you in. In this show, so many of the plots revolve around group infighting. It's repetitive,
and it feels like they rarely save people. The characters get too close too fast, and they weirdly don't acknowledge the events of the previous crossover. The main overarching story is a very slow burn. It's not even touched upon in the show's one and only two-parter, and again, it ends on a cliffhanger with Douglas being dead. So yeah, it's a bad show, but it has too many good qualities for me to truly hate it like others do. With the other characters being the way they are, Bradley Stephen Perry is forced to carry the comedy on his back, and honestly, he was up to the task. They easily could have made him an Adam clone, but no, Kaz is still his charming, funny self, and he and Oliver are still really cute friends. Plus, you still have Douglas and Perry occasionally coming in to breathe life into the show. I guess with Perry being antagonistic by design, it's harder to screw her up, even if the excuses to keep her around keep getting weaker, and they missed a lot of what made her funny when she quit being principal. So I hope you can understand why I don't consider it irredeemable. Would I have preferred these shows been allowed to end on their own terms? Of course. Is it a cynical cash grab? Absolutely. But as far as cynical cash grabs go, I've seen much, much worse.
You're watching Kerpranked with Justin Kerprank.
In another attempt to appeal to the internet generation, Disney XD brings us Walk the Prank, a show about 4 kids who make prank videos. And even beyond that, this show can get very pandering with some of the lingo and references. Each episode consists of a scripted storyline broken up by 4 authentic hidden camera pranks. I wasn't sure how canon these pranks were to the storylines, given the crew being a lot bigger than 4 kids and a middle-aged man, but in one episode they mentioned having a hair and makeup team. implying these kids are loaded and have no reason to be outcasts in school when they have a channel that's apparently popular enough to get celebrity guest stars and Disney sponsorships. Yeah, they do a couple Disney Channel cross promotions. Surprisingly never with Bizaardvark, even though that would have actually made a lot of sense. This format confuses me. If you wanted to watch pranks, you'd be annoyed that they're interrupted by plot, and because they're constantly interrupted by pranks, a lot of the storylines are underdeveloped.
Maybe if you just bookended each episode with a prank or made it more like a mockumentary, it could work.
But as is, I think they would have been better off just releasing these pranks as commercial fluff, or maybe even directly to YouTube.
Since, yeah, the best pranks would get posted to YouTube and get a lot of views.
And these pranks are pretty good, even if I could do without Chance's narration.
They used the whip crack sound effect so much you'd swear this was Johnny Test.
And, okay,
And they get repetitive after a while. Clearly this show wasn't made to be binged. By the end of it, they were really running out of ideas. The storylines, on the other hand, are pretty generic sitcom fare most of the time, not having much, if anything, to do with their web show, and the segues are usually pretty forced.
Technology isn't always a good thing, and I can prove it.
These kids are also huge pricks, but I love Uncle Will. And no, it's not just because we share a name, he's also hilarious. I also kind of like Herman, which I chalk up to his actor's charisma, since while you might feel bad for him at first with how poorly he's treated, he quickly reveals himself to be just as awful as the rest of them, with his obsessive crush on Bailey. That being said, this show feels a bit more self-aware than most. In any other Disney show, the protagonist is rewarded purely for their persistence, completely defying logic and setting a horrible example for little boys in the audience. But here, Bailey only starts to reciprocate Herman's feelings
once she realizes he's just as terrible as her.
They're perfect for each other in a weird, twisted way. Still, they make the mistake of trying to make us feel for these characters every now and then. Oh, also Bailey's sister JD is introduced in season 3. I don't think she added much to the show. When it comes to the side characters, they reminded me a lot of Zeke and Luther and Kirby Buckets, with how they're all kind of one note and quirky. I didn't like any of their classmates or family members, but everything with the school staff is actually really funny, with how cartoonishly they're portrayed, including Kevin McDonald as their science teacher. Some of the dialogue in this show is surprisingly witty, and some of the overarching plot developments are interesting. In season 2, Bailey starts dating a Russian boy named
Vlad, who joins the crew.
He's kinda funny with his quips about the motherland, and to their credit, they wrote him off just as I was getting sick of him. And at the end of season 2, we find out Uncle Will has been secretly dating Bailey's mom. Season 3 building up to their wedding in the finale, before we find out that this whole time, Uncle Will was actually just playing with dolls in an abandoned building. Will Williams, 2. Will Williams 0. I almost wish they committed to this twist just so it could be included in clickbait articles of top 5 kids shows with dark finales. Overall, it's a mix of good ideas with very weird execution and a lot of bullcrap. Take it for what it's worth.
My life is like a video game.
The first show on this list, Aaron Stone, and the last show on this list, MechX4, make for very good bookends. They're both generic superhero shows that take themselves more seriously than they probably should, and more coincidentally, they both lasted roughly 35 episodes. Despite having the honor of being Disney XD's first ever original series, I never see anyone talk about Aaron Stone, and Disney has effectively buried it, but thankfully I was able to track down all 35 episodes. Unlike Lab Rats or Mighty Med, both of these are single cam shows without a laugh track, and yeah, they share a lot of problems. The dialogue is cheesy, most of the performances performances are either too wooden or too hokey, and the characters are cliche as hell. Neither got a proper finale. Aaron Stone ends on a cliffhanger, while Mech X4's still leaves open a lot of loose ends. Mech X4 is also much more reliant on special effects, and they range from passable
to laughably bad.
Aaron Stone has the more confusing concept. There's this kid named Charlie Landers, who's the #1 player in the game Hero Rising, with the screen name Aaron Stone. But then it turns out that everything in the game is real, and I guess was created to find a person to stop the bad guys in real life, and it's him. Oh, and the show constantly feels the need to remind you that everything in the game is real, especially early on. Meanwhile, Mech X4 has the more straightforward premise, but gets really convoluted as it goes on. Sometimes Aaron Stone looks like it's gonna go into philosophy, but it usually ends up being pretty shallow. The main actor also reminds me a lot of Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker, with him not being a very convincing loser. It doesn't help that this show can't make up its mind whether he is a loser. Oh, and speaking of Spider-Man, both these shows kind of do a Spider-Man free, with a nerdy character coming in contact with a substance that makes him more aggressive. And the Aaron Stone finale is kind of like Amazing Spider-Man, with a mutant villain trying to turn the whole world into mutants. I think Aaron Stone has a slight edge over Mech X4 because despite having characters I downright dislike, like Charlie's douchey brother Jason, and the Indian stereotypes Vaz and Ram, it also has characters I actually like, those being Charlie's neighbor and possible love interest Emma, and his android sidekick Stan. He has most of the show's funniest moments, and JP Minot plays a robot really well. If an episode focuses on him, it's guaranteed to be one of the best. Meanwhile, I feel neutral towards pretty much every character in Mech X4. Both these shows actually have pretty good music. Compared to Aaron Stone, Mech X4 has more of a generic orchestral score, but it still goes way harder than it needs to sometimes. And both have an earnestness to them that makes me like them. Yeah, they're not good on any objective level, but it really feels like they were trying to make good shows for kids. And for kids, I'm sure they would love these. Perhaps the two shows that best embody the heart of Disney XD.
Jarvis, scan this guy's balls.
I didn't care for Earth's Mightiest Heroes either. This show was well received upon release, but I don't see anyone talk about it nowadays. So I don't know how many people I'm gonna upset with this, but I found it mostly average. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe I don't care about these particular characters enough to get invested. Maybe it's the fact there's so many characters that the show splits its focus between. It's hard to get invested. But most of all, I think it's because a lot of it is pretty generic storylines, both for these particular characters and superheroes in general, with the better episodes usually put in more of an interesting spin. And when you're not invested in the stories or characters, it's hard to get invested in the action, which takes up the bulk of most episodes. The animation doesn't help either,
but at least it's better stylized than the shows that followed.
And instead of a generic title drop, we have an actual theme song.
A total earworm that gets you pumped for the show.
The best on this list. But in season 2, they cut the first half in favor of narration. Why? The MCU was well underway at this point. I'm sure most kids already knew who these guys were. All this being said,
it's still miles better than any of the other Marvel cartoons they made. If I was a 6 to 11-year-old boy who wanted an Avengers cartoon,
this would satisfy.
What could possibly go wrong?
Oh, Milo Murphy's Law, the overlooked middle child of Dan Povenmire, forever doomed to live in the shadow of its older brother, Phineas and Ferb. It's fine. The way Murphy's Law functions in this show is completely illogical and inconsistent, which would be fine if they didn't try to explain it, and the formula isn't as flexible as Phineas and Ferb's. It's not that funny, but not horribly unfunny either. Most of the time anyway. They do have a penchant for overly long gags and become way more self-deprecating in season 2.
Believe it or not, constantly acknowledging your laziness
isn't clever, it just makes you look even lazier. And they can never just have a character say something quirky and that be the joke. Every time another character has to retort, which can be funny, like they're saying what the audience is thinking. Phineas and Ferb did this sometimes too, but they way overdo it here. I love Weird Al, but besides that, the characters are fine, and the songs are fine.
It really is no wonder this show never escaped Phineas and Ferb's shadows, since it didn't really try to.
They constantly reference Phineas and Ferb,
culminating in a full-on crossover,
which ends with Doofenshmirtz becoming a main character. I wish I was joking. And the changes made from Phineas and Ferb are ultimately meaningless, as tonally and stylistically it's identical, just a watered-down version. Compare that to another show on this list, Wander Over Yonder, which feels completely distinct from creator Craig McCracken's previous shows.
Phineas and Ferb was a tough act to follow, and Milo Murphy wasn't up to the task.
Space adventure, it's an adventure in space!
Star Wars Rebels is fine. The stories are fine. The characters are fine. The animation's good for TV grade CG. The music's also pretty good, even if much of it's recycled from the movies.
It says a lot when most of the best characters are from previous Star Wars media.
Whether it be the movies or Clone Wars. Kind of gives the impression this team would have rather still been making Clone Wars. Still, this kid show has a main character
who halfway through is blinded and stays blind and sacrifices himself and stays dead with 5 episodes still left to go.
So, thumbs up for that, though they still don't use the words dead or kill. Instead they say gone and eliminate. In general, this show can have some really corny dialogue, again with a found family dynamic, and the stories can get really melodramatic.
Also, I know people say this about the movies too,
but man are the stormtroopers pathetic. Our heroes are constantly taking these guys out with ease, which kind of eliminates tension. Tron Uprising and Motor City are much better dystopian action cartoons, but they weren't based on Star Wars, so they didn't get to finish their stories, though this show still leaves enough room for the story to continue in a potential spin-off.
I think the dwarves have your mother confused with someone else.
I loved the 7D as a kid, but hadn't watched it in years, since Disney for some reason refuses to release it. How does it hold up? Meh. It has its merits, but is an all-around mediocre comedy cartoon. It was originally made for Disney Junior, which kind of shows. I mean, even conceptually, this is the only Disney XD show based on iconography from classic Disney. Meanwhile, all of Disney Junior's most popular shows at the time were. And while the show never committed to having a moral each episode, when they do come up in season 1, they always spell them out. But it also shares a lot of DNA with Animaniacs, which also kind of shows a lot of slapstick violence. Makes me think maybe the switch was because it wasn't quite sanitized enough for Disney Junior. But now it was stuck in this limbo where it wasn't sanitized enough for Disney Junior, but still feels too sanitized for Disney XD. And I feel like the critics at the time would have gone easier on it had it stayed on Disney Junior. That being said, I think it could have found a place in the bigger Disney XD brand. It actually shares a lot in common with Wander Over Yonder. Both are upbeat, semi-musical comedy cartoons with a simple good versus evil dynamic and Looney Tunes inspired gags. Not that it's nearly as good as that show. The 7 dwarves are pretty flat characters. Who would have guessed? The strongest among them are Kevin Michael Richardson as Happy and Maurice LaMarche as Grumpy. Yeah, this show has a pretty stacked voice cast if you're someone like me who recognizes voice actors, including Amy Duncan as Queen Delightful. It's surprising she didn't do more voice work since she's pretty good at it. And Kelly Osbourne is also surprisingly good as Hildy. Though as much as I love Jess Harnell, I didn't find myself laughing much at Grimm as an adult. In fact, the character I found myself laughing at most on rewatch was the Queen's assistant, Lord Starchbottom, voiced by Paul Rugg. He hates the 7D, seemingly because they overshadow him as the Queen's protectors, but also because they're ungodly annoying, and misfortune is sure to befall him whenever they're together, leading to comedy gold. Looks-wise, it's mixed. There's strong expressions and posing, but the style is very generic, and the animation isn't fast enough to sell the jokes. The main characters were designed by Noah Z. Jones, creator of Fish Hooks, Almost Naked Animals, and Pickle and Peanut. But whenever there's a new character, they're in a completely different art style. The songs were done by Perry Grip, known for such viral hits as
It's Raining Tacos
and
Nom 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 nom.
And
Do you like waffles?
And his music does fit the tone of the show pretty well. More than anything, I got far more tired of this show's formula than Wander's. Unlike that show, the heroes come across like morons, with them always falling for the gloom's poor disguises. I'm convinced everyone in this kingdom is face blind. There's an episode where Dobie puts an elephant in dwarf clothes and everyone falls for it. It's a cartoon I think might have worked better in 7-minute increments instead of 11, since they don't seem to know what to do with that length a lot of the time. Most episodes either dragging or resolving themselves too quickly. I was hoping things would improve in season 2 due to it being made with Disney XD in mind from the start, but instead it slips further into comfortable mediocrity, though there is a noticeable increase in adult humor and the characters get meaner. Also more emphasis on running gags and catchphrases and boomer references. But worst of all, Starch Bottom becomes way less prominent. Are you kidding me? It's unfortunate because I really did love this show as a kid. It's a rare show I kept up with pretty much from start to finish. I was surprised how much I remembered, but it probably would have been better left as a nostalgic memory.
Kirby, that's a name you should know.
I thought Kirby Buckets looked really stupid as a kid and never watched it, which is kind of a shame since I probably would have actually liked it. I mean, the main character is an aspiring animator
whose drawings get him into trouble.
That was me as a kid, though Kirby is usually portrayed as a good and smart kid, which I certainly wasn't. Kirby's drawings are actually the worst part of the show. They're well animated, but all they do is interrupt the plot with bad jokes. Kirby will stare off into space and see them doing dumb shit, and they were all over the marketing, which is probably what turned me away from the show. Now its biggest disadvantage is that I've seen Zeke and Luther, and boy is this show way too similar to Zeke and Luther. Instead of a traditional sitcom, it's more like a cartoon. Instead of laugh tracks, we've got wacky sound effects and music cues. The humor's more surreal with all these kooky side characters. Even some of the characters and plots are similar, making me wonder if there was creative overlap. And I love Zeke and Luther, so when your show is constantly reminding me of it, I'm gonna judge it more harshly. And for the first season and most of season 2, Kirby Buckets really just feels like a poor man's Zeke and Luther, which mostly comes down to the characters. Some of the side characters are fun, while some of them just feel like less funny versions of characters from other shows. Big Ricky is funny, I just wish his main character trait wasn't his crush on Dawn. The main cast in particular is nothing special. You've got a typical boy trio, Maine, Fat, and Black, the embarrassing parents, and so on and so forth. Honestly, I thought the most interesting character was Kirby's sister, Dawn, due to how cartoonishly awful they make her, and they somehow make her worse as it goes on. The episodes focusing on her and Kirby's relationship tend to be some of the best ones, better than her plots involving her sidekick Belinda, who definitely has a crush on her. It's implied Dawn's only as terrible as she is because she's been deprived of affection, always overshadowed by her younger brother who mocks her, which of course they never take seriously, but does make her more compelling. And she ends up with Big Ricky? I mean,
it's nice she gets a happy ending,
but who actually wanted that? The more logical conclusion would have been Dawn and Belinda. It would have taken some character development to make it non-toxic, but you could have made it work. Of course, Disney in 2017 wasn't gonna allow that, though Dawn is possibly confirmed bi?
You mean the theater kids? They're so dark and mysterious. I have crushes on all of them.
All this being said, I think they really hit their stride towards the end of season 2. So naturally, they decided to go in a completely different direction for season 3. Kind of like the Fresh Beat Band, actually.
Suddenly, it's all about hopping dimensions and stopping villains, and devolves into confusing nonsense that takes itself way too seriously.
I would have hated this as a kid. It's too much change too fast.
I think it was probably a compromise.
Disney was only going to give them a third season if they made these changes, especially since they renamed it Kirby Buckets Warped. Even though honestly, the season 2 finale would have been more satisfying. Kirby's dream of making cartoons comes true. His arc is over.
Though Kirby should have known that having his real sister be a character on his show would get him in trouble.
And they really did us dirty by having Dawn sue Kirby entirely off screen. That could have been a whole episode.
episode. I feel bad for anyone who was a dedicated viewer at the time. It's completely unrecognizable by the end.
But not unwatchable, and despite all my bitching, I would consider Kirby Buckets an above average show. Not great,
but I like it more than I dislike it, which counts for something.
Hey, wait a minute, what happened? What happens next? Come on, let's see the next episode!
Tron Uprising and Motor City have a surprising amount in common. They started and ended around the same time, they're both dystopian action cartoons, and both were prematurely cancelled. They're also pretty much on par for me quality-wise, so it made sense to review them in one segment.
Tron Uprising was part of Disney's attempt to revive Tron in the early 2010s.
Taking place between the first movie and its first Legacy sequel, yet coming out 2 years after the latter. The 2.5D style was the right call in replicating the movie's iconic look.
And unlike the movie, I actually understood what was happening.
The first 12 episodes are fine, but it really picks up in those last 7.
The uprising has begun.
This is the last episode of a show called Tron Uprising.
Don't you hate it when a show gets canceled right as it's getting good?
Still wasn't as devastating as Motor City's finale. Damn it, Motor City is so cool. The overarching plot is investing, even if the characters didn't really do much for me, and the one-off storylines and humor are pretty hit or miss.
But it makes up for all of that by being one of the best looking shows on this list, with breathtaking action scenes complemented by an orgasmic metal soundtrack.
They also totally wanted Patrick Warburton as Texas, but couldn't get him, so instead we have Jess Harnell doing a Patrick Warburton impression.
Best extreme smashing.
Screw you, Disney, for canceling these two. Star vs. the Forces of Evil was beloved for a time, but now no one wants to talk about it because of how badly it ended. I really liked the first 2 seasons, but didn't keep up with the latter 2. But unlike other shows on this list, this one's on Disney+, so I did actually rewatch the first 2 seasons more recently. I meant to watch the whole show, but couldn't make it past season 3. This was in 8th grade, which was 5 years ago, but surprisingly, my opinions haven't changed much. The first half of season 1 is an unremarkable fish out of water cartoon, and the pacing feels a bit rushed. Star and Marco become best friends way too quickly. Marco knowing karate is a weak excuse for him to be able to do all the things he does in the show, and it's weird how everyone immediately accepts that Star's a magical princess from another dimension. There's also some terrible side characters who are thankfully phased out with time, but not Ponyhead, who just might be the worst character of any show on this list, which is saying a lot. The kind of character who drags down every episode she's in. Her voice is nails on a chalkboard, and she's a completely one-dimensional asshole from start to finish. The animation is really good, until they switched animation houses, and switched from Flash to digital ink. Then it's less good, which is best exemplified by the season 3 intro. Not only is the animation much lower energy, but while the original fills you in on the backstory, this one would be incomprehensible if you hadn't seen the show before. That being said,
while the original credits song is cute and all,
I do prefer the anime-inspired outro of the latter 2 seasons. If there's one thing that stays consistent, it's the music. The second half of season 1 is when the plot starts to get going, and also when the quality picks up, continuing into season 2,
which is all around pretty good,
though there's still a handful of boring filler episodes. The locations and concepts are creative, Star and Marco are very likable protagonists, and I like a lot of the side characters, like Jana, River, and Buffrog. I also like Glossaric,
but don't understand why they brought him back, even recasting him with Keith David,
seeing he barely does anything in the back half. Some of the romance drama is still corny, but I could forgive it since it is still a kid show at the end of the day.
It was hard to get into the story and lore though,
when I knew there wouldn't be a satisfying conclusion most of the time. Ludo at least gets a complete character arc. Meanwhile, Toffee is cool, but ultimately fails to live up to his potential. Did you know he's voiced by Dexter?
Now Dexter's not Dexter, but Dexter's this bad TV show.
The big problem with this show's pacing, which reveals itself in Battle for Muni, is that they'll dedicate whole episodes to small plot developments while glossing over big stuff.
So in the end, the overarching story of the first 2 seasons wraps up in a very underwhelming way. play, and the show completely nosedives after that. Suddenly we go from the diverse locations of the first 2 seasons to all Muni all the time.
Meaning a lot of the side characters we've gotten used to are now rare, without many new side characters to take their place. All because Marco couldn't take off a stupid cape for his girlfriend and lifelong crush.
Even though just a few episodes ago, Marco learned he shouldn't abandon his friends and family for a life of adventure,
and he has dimensional scissors and could visit Star anytime he wants.
A fact they even acknowledge. In general, Star and Marco become a lot more grating, and we also get way more Ponyhead, and they somehow make her even worse.
Queen napped?
Would have been a character assassination had I actually liked her before then. All around, the episodes become a lot slower paced and less funny, and the romance stuff gets completely out of hand. Starco would have been so easy to pull off, but instead they spend so much time teasing us with more unexpected pairings
that it feels even cheaper when they all break up unceremoniously just so Starco can happen.
Because a boy and a girl can't just be best friends. Especially disappointing when you consider the first 2 seasons had some great and unique messages about dealing with crushes and relationships, and annoying when the show still insists that Star and Marco are good role models. The Blood Moon Curse also should have never been treated as a real thing, and they really shouldn't have made Marco age 16 years. Their alternate love interests and their arcs, Tom bettering himself for Star and befriending Marco, and Kelly learning to get over her ex, are some of the only things I enjoyed about these latter seasons, which rings hollow once you realize they were only kept around as red herrings, and the former kind of becomes a butt monkey for some reason. That only leaves you with Eclipsa, who I do like, even if her and her husband being good makes little sense given all the foreshadowing that they were evil, especially when they have to make the magical High Commission members assholes to further the storyline. It's clear they were making up the story as they went and sacrificed logic for unpredictability, best exemplified by that finale. Mina, a one-off joke character
who wasn't funny to begin with, is now our endgame villain.
Moon's betrayal betrays her character, and a decision to destroy magic and merge the dimensions feels completely sudden and brings up way more questions than answers. There's been whispers of a revival, but I honestly hope it won't happen. I don't think they could recover from this. With purely episodic shows, you can just ignore the bad seasons, but with a serialized show like this, you can't do that. If you stop after season 2, or even after Battle for Muni, you're getting an incomplete story.
Even a show like Lab Rats, which had similar problems in its back half,
was never this bafflingly awful.
Can I see what's in your basement?
As mentioned, I already made a full review of Lab Rats several years back, and while I'd make it better now, I still agree with a lot of what I said in that video. Most of my opinion changes are on specific episodes, which I'm not getting into. So this segment will primarily be me correcting and elaborating on my previous statements about the show as a whole. If you've seen that video, you're probably surprised it's not higher.
One of their best shows, and probably their best sitcom, was Lab Rats.
Yeah,
absolutely not.
At its best, it was a funny, enjoyable show,
but never reached the heights of some of its contemporaries.
Compared to Kickin' It, which also kind of fell off in its back half, Lab Rats fell harder. By the end of season 1 of Lab Rats,
Adam and Chase are pretty much the same characters Jerry and Milton are by the very end of that show,
which is not a good thing. They kind of wrote themselves into a corner with Chase. In the original pitch, Chase had super speed, but when greenlit for a full series, Bree was added,
so Chase was given smarts. But the problem with having a character who is the smartest man in the world is it would prevent conflict.
So they have him always say that, but never actually live up to it, making him seem conceited, creating a completely different problem. Their solution was to turn him into a butt monkey, but that only served to make the other characters less likable.
Especially when a lot of it is
body shaming him, when anyone could look at this guy and tell
he doesn't have a tiny doll-like body. But despite everyone constantly pointing out how unlikable he is,
they still try to say otherwise. I think I exaggerated Adam's flanderization in my old review. He and Chase's insult on each other is usually both-sided. What makes it unfair is that Adam has the physical advantage, and that everyone else also shits on Chase. Over time, this show became more and more reliant on the lazy humor of the characters constantly insulting each other. I very much preferred the earlier dynamic of Adam and Chase teaming up against Bree. They seemed like they actually liked and respected each other. On Leo's character, I said this.
Leo's actor was going through some changes, which kind of gets rid of some of the charm of him being this goofy little kid, but what can you do?
What they could have done was have his character mature along with his actor, because while Tyrell Jackson Williams still brings his signature charisma to Leo in the latter seasons, when Leo acted like a dick in the first 2 seasons, it was like, aw, what a charming little scamp. When he acts out in the last 2 seasons, it's like, this grown man is beefing with a 12-year-old. What an asshole. Also, much like Chase, they still make jokes about him being tiny. This shows an overarching problem with the show, which is a lack of character development, which becomes pretty off-putting when, unlike most sitcoms,
the world around the characters is constantly changing.
But just like most sitcoms, the characters never do. It's the definition of the more things change, the more they stay the same. Douglas gets a redemption arc, as well as Principal Perry to a lesser extent, which I think is just because they really liked those characters. Besides that, no character development until the very end, with Leo getting a pretty good character arc in On the Edge, and I think they tried to replicate it with Adam and Space Colony. They probably already knew they wouldn't return for Elite Force, but even then they seem afraid to commit to it.
And from now on, I'm gonna be a perfectly responsible adult. Great. You know it's never gonna happen, right? Yeah, I figured as much.
More so than kicking it, this show seems very afraid to have an emotional moment
that isn't undermined by a cheap joke
and or doesn't have sappy music under it, despite going to much darker places than kicking it. More than the crappy effects and fight scenes, I think this is the reason I found most of the double-length episodes pretty underwhelming on this watch, despite speaking highly of most of them in my old review. That, and a lot of them don't really justify their length, with really boring first halves mostly disconnected from the more interesting second halves, though I'm sure Disney was demanding more specials, so I can't entirely blame them. Random thought I had on this watch: wouldn't it have been more interesting if instead of Bree breaking her chip and Leo becoming bionic being unrelated events, Leo became bionic to replace Bree on the team as sort of a role reversal? At its best, Lab Rats was a good sitcom, but Disney XD's best? I don't think so.
I'm not a puppet. I'm a real boy.
Oh hell yeah, Crash and Bernstein, best anime. In all seriousness, I already did a full review of this show,
and in that video, I said pretty much everything that could ever be said about it.
So, in short, at its best, a hilarious and creative show with a strong main duo, but it suffers from an exceptionally weak sidecast leading to exceptionally weak subplots, and even the main plots can get repetitive or generic. You might say it should have lasted longer, but I say it's good it got cut short,
since you can tell they were already running out of ideas at the end.
And at the start, it takes a little bit for the show to really tap into its weird potential. But if you know which episodes to watch, you'll be in for a great time. One thing I'd like to add is of all the shows on this list, this is the only one that pulls off having jerk protagonists. A lot of these sitcoms will sacrifice likability for the sake of comedy, which makes it hard to get invested in the drama. What separates Crash and Bernstein is self-awareness. All of the main characters are pretty bad people, but the show is aware of this and treats them as such.
And it's not long before they give up on ever taking themselves seriously.
Most of the time. Some might think I've ranked it too high, but if you know me, you know if it's not first place, the shows above it must be really damn good. So let's give these new gems their time to shine, shall we?
I love carrot cake.
Kickin' It is an all-around solid kidcom. It's funny, and while not the most unique bunch, the characters are all likable, which I mostly credit to the actors portraying them, except Joan, screw Joan, and Frank, screw Frank, and Albert, screw Albert. But the rest are all good. The theme song is also great, though I preferred it before they randomly re-recorded it 10 episodes in.
And no matter how much I chop and punch, it's not as cool as kicking it with Joe. And no matter how much I chop and punch, it's not as cool as kicking it with Joe.
The pacing also gets thrown off as the cast keeps getting smaller, with them even having to cut it shorter in the 4th season.
As good as this show is, the drama can feel just as forced as the shows below at times, and it can get kind of sappy. The wasabi code gets cornier every time they say it, which by the end of the show, they never do. It's also hard to pinpoint the thing that would elevate this beyond being just an above average kid-com, besides maybe the fight scenes. Those are very well done. Something oddly specific I can say about the first 2 seasons is that they balance the cast really well.
In most episodes, they manage to give all the major characters something to do,
and fit a lot into one episode without feeling cluttered. It does fall off a bit after season 2. Not because of Eddie, he always felt like an afterthought,
though I do think he helped round out the main cast. But the show started to fall into a lot of the traps that long-running shows do.
The plots and jokes became more stock, like they were written on autopilot.
There started to be a fair bit of gross out, weirdly enough.
And several characters got flanderized. Milton got reduced to little more than a butt monkey, Jerry randomly started acting like a jerk in season 4, and Rudy became just as dumb as Jerry to the point
where their lines felt interchangeable.
Oisim Dina Evil, Ojad Wen Wu Nine Po.
Sam could have been a good opportunity to have him mature,
but instead they used him to make Rudy look even more childish. Also in season 4, they started making a lot of jokes about Rudy and Jerry getting no women, even though they got a lot of women in the previous seasons. And I hate what they did with Milton's girlfriend, Julie. First, they have him break up with her off-screen in Gabby's Gold, I guess so he can date Gabby Douglas, which to be fair is kind of funny. And when she returned in season 4, she randomly became a jerk off-screen. Still, I think season 4 was a slight improvement over 3, simply due to being more memorable on average. And the show managed to end with some of its dignity intact. It was always enjoyable more often than it wasn't, which is more than can be said about other shows.
Unironically better than Cobra Kai, but that's a story for another day.
Life's as extreme as you wanna make it!
Kick Buttowski is an all-around solid cartoon. It's funny, looks great, and the soundtrack kicks ass. Or butt, I guess I should say. Speaking of which, there's actually an absurd amount of ass in this show. What's that all about? Kick and Gumpher managed to have a great dynamic while being good characters in their own right. As different as they are inside and out, you'd expect this to be the dynamic of the reckless kid who drags his worrywart friend into misadventures despite his reluctance, making you kind of wonder why they're friends.
But they're actually on the same page most of the time.
And in only a few episodes is their friendship put on the line for cheap drama, which is really nice to see. There are also boy characters voiced by grown men, which can often be distracting, but their voices fit their designs so well you hardly notice. If there's one weak spot, it's the side characters. Sure, Brad and Harold are funny,
and the former is one of the show's better antagonists. And Kendall's also a pretty good foil for Kick.
I'm upset they never got to resolve the obvious romantic tension between them. Usually when shows try to make the whole bullying you cause I like you thing romantic, it's kind of gross. It works better when it's both-sided, like in this show, though we all know Kick and Gumpher are the real OTP.
What's your mom's first name?
Honey.
Don't be shy, Sugar, just tell me.
They're really gay.
But the rest range from completely serviceable to extremely annoying. While I'm not sure we need a full reboot, they had a good run as is.
52 half hours, that's over 100 stories.
I would love a movie or special to at least give it a proper finale. Please, Disney.
Lastly, there's some weird parallels between this and The Loud House.
I mean, a little sister who's a pageant girl voiced by Gray Delisle, and a dad voiced by Brian Stepanek, who even looks a bit like him.
It's almost as if Chris Savino played a major role in this show's production.
But that's impossible. Oh.
Still a good show, though.
So there's an infinite number of parallel universes?
No, just the two.
Oh, well, I'm sure that's enough.
I loved Penn-Zero as a kid, but hadn't watched it in years, since Disney for some reason refuses to release it, and I'm glad to say it holds up way better than the 7D, despite me watching it less as a kid. Beyond the premise and characters, I only remembered a handful of episodes. It's a great concept for a cartoon.
Penn is a part-time hero, which means he fills in for heroes across different dimensions
to win the battles they can't, and the show delivers on the comedy and creativity you'd want from that, even if there's way too many sequel episodes for a show this short.
The humor can be juvenile, but most of the time, this show is really funny.
Like Phineas and Ferb level with the dialogue and visual gags. The main trio really isn't anything special. You have the confident protagonist, his dumb best friend, and the tough girl with a violent streak, but I don't know, they kind of grew on me. I kind of wish Boone was voiced by Jack Black, but there's no way they were getting him. And Sashi is voiced by the female lead from the greatest show of all time, Aaron Stone. And unlike in Aaron Stone, the romantic tensions between her and the title character are actually resolved, and they don't bog it down with red herrings like a certain other show. I love some of the side characters like Phyllis or this random old man who shows up from time to time, but the real stars of the show are the villains, just as I remembered it. The villain with an ambiguously gay sidekick is a trope as old as time, even on Disney XD, but what sets Larry apart from the others on this list is while Peepers and Viceroy and Belinda are shown to be the brains of the outfit, Larry is the incompetent one, and is also a genuinely sweet guy. I would hate that they try to straightwash him towards the end, but it's pretty damn funny. And unlike Hater or Dawn, Ripon gets a fully realized redemption arc.
We need a doctor! Call an ambulance! Hurry, call an ambulance!
Come to think of it, heroes would have made a lot of sense for this show. I can't say I'm a fan of the art style. They tried different styles a couple times, but I wish they did that more. The overarching plot is simple and straightforward.
Penn needs to get his parents back
from the most dangerous world imaginable, where Ripon sent them, and the finale is damn near perfect.
I don't really care how long a show lasts, as long as it sticks the landing.
And boy did they. Almost every character has a role, and every plot thread and arc wrapped up with a neat bow. It could honestly give Gravity Falls a run for its money. I highly recommend this show. You just might have to watch it illegally.
Thanks, Disney.
Weenie Hut General!
Y'all were right. Mighty Med slaps. I sincerely apologize for not watching it sooner. It's a great premise. Two comic book nerds using their knowledge to work at a superhero hospital. At the start, they rely a bit too much on cliche sitcom plots, but over time, you get more of the fun stories you'd hope for. And the show gets more serious and serialized, while the humor also gets stronger. That's what really makes it stand tall as the best multicam show on this list. The comedy. Besides Crash and Bernstein, this is the most surreal of them, with really out there gags you don't expect in these shows. And unlike Crash and Bernstein, I actually like most of the characters. I don't think there's one I actively dislike, besides maybe the rich girl at school. Besides that, there's Oliver and Skylar, who I'd describe as serviceable. Much like Chase, the former can be grating in some episodes, and a bit of a butt monkey, and like Billy Unger, Jake Short is the weak link.
Not helped by us watching him go through puberty in real time.
Take him, so gross, so gross!
Seriously, at the start it looks like Bradley Perry should be giving him wedgies, but he's actually younger than him. But generally, he's a functional protagonist. Skylar's another character who's there to be the token girl to pull in the girl demographic, but she's not the worst of those characters.
Paris Burrell brings a certain likability to the character, and her personality is mostly consistent.
Alan took a while to grow on me, but when he did, he really did. Though an unfortunate side effect of Oliver and Kaz being the main characters
is that Alan will often be paired up with Skylar for subplots, and they don't have much chemistry.
Similarly, I really didn't like Jordan at first,
but then they started pairing her with Gus, who she plays off of very well. And it looked like she might actually be important, finding out about Mighty Med, but unfortunately she never does.
Speaking of Gus, I was really annoyed by him in the pilot. He seemed like the creepy kind of weird.
But the pilot is the worst episode. worse than the crossover.
I'd recommend skipping it. In the following episodes, he becomes the funny, endearing kind of weird.
And I think Augie Isaac deserves just as much credit as the writers for that.
Same with Bradley Stephen Perry, who makes Kaz such a lovable moron. And I could go on naming every other recurring character, Wallace and Clyde, Philip, but my absolute favorite has to be Horace, with his eccentric personality and love of bridges. It's criminal they never gave Carlos Lasamara a spot in the theme song, which is pretty bad, by the way. Sorry, Adam Hicks. This show can be mean-spirited,
but I wouldn't say it goes too far.
Except for the treatment of Alan. Hear me out. Alan is a child character whose guardian, Horace, makes it known he wants nothing to do with him.
It doesn't matter how many times he promises to be a better uncle.
This is the status quo.
And the adult superheroes he's surrounded by
also make their hatred of him known, violently.
Wow, she only shoved me. She used to scramble my insides with gamma rays. I'm so popular now.
You're supposed to think because Alan's a bad person, it justifies this treatment, but instead it makes you think maybe the reason he's horrible is because all the adults in his life have failed him. It's crazy that despite Lab Rats being their flagship show, most of its peers were clearly given more money and creative freedom. Why couldn't we get season 3? They could have done an episode guest starring the Lightbringer. Imagine, Linkara gives their comic a bad review, they go to his house to confront him,
but then bond by fighting Mecha-Kara.
Oh well. It's like the old saying, you either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain. Future Worm is one of those shows that was written off by cartoon fans as just another random XD show at a time when those were hated. It's also a sci-fi cartoon that came out right around
when Rick and Morty was getting really popular, and thus had the misfortune of constantly being compared to it
due to surface level similarities, even though I actually like it a good bit more than Rick and Morty. I don't love Rick and Morty, but I do love Future Worm. Instead of the standard format of 2 11-minute segments,
Future Worm consists of an 11-minute segment,
a 7-minute segment, and a 3-minute segment. Probably because these started as 3-minute shorts, but it's a format I think other shows could have benefited from. Unlike Pickle and Peanut, the surreal humor is usually clever, and it tells jokes with so much enthusiasm I can't imagine not smiling at it. The art style is ugly, but cute ugly. The characters usually learn something by the end, and while the lessons are obvious, it's an easy way to make your stories feel more complete, and it has characters you can actually latch on to. Fuchs and Danny can both be the voice of reason depending on the episode, but in a way that actually makes sense. Danny is a kid,
so he can be rash,
while Fuchs has a bit of an ego problem, but no matter what,
they've got each other's backs.
The formula honestly reminds me more of something like Fairly Odd Parents or Jimmy Neutron than Rick and Morty, with a young boy using
fantastical elements
to solve a mundane problem, only for it to have unintended consequences. I guess you could compare Danny's father Doug to Jerry Smith, with him being a huge loser who Fuchs berates, and a pretty terrible partner, but unlike Rick and Jerry, Fuchs's disdain towards Doug seems one-sided, and unlike Jerry, Doug's family seems to like him this way, so who am I to judge? There's a plethora of great side characters as well. Bug is adorable and also has 2 dads, which I wonder if that had anything to do with Disney burying this show. Neil deGrasse Tyson has a hilarious role as himself. There's Steak Starbolt, their parody of action heroes. The list goes on. There's actually an overarching story, albeit a slow burn due to our hero's disinterest in it, but it leads up to another nearly perfect finale. So it's another show I'm not that sad got cut short. They still got 60 stories.
And it's another I highly recommend if you overlooked it while it was on.
Totally gnarly dudes, man.
Holy crap, I wasn't expecting Zeke and Luther to be this good. I didn't expect it to be this funny and this charming, but it is. I sincerely apologize for not seeing its greatness sooner. Unlike most Disney XD sitcoms, which have your traditional multicam setup, Zeke and Luther is single cam.
Probably so they could get better skateboarding shots. But it also allows for more wacky camera angles.
It's trying to be less of your traditional sitcom and more of a live-action cartoon. More Scott Fellows than Dan Schneider, and it's glorious. On top of making use of wacky sound effects and music cues, not as much as those shows. It truly feels like a show where anything can happen. Every dumb joke or scenario that pops into the writers' heads makes it in. The kind where you can't help but laugh wondering how they came up with this stuff, and yet it somehow still feels grounded. Like cartoons of old, we never see the parents and the kids rarely go to school, so it avoids a lot of the stock plots that come with the territory, and even when they do use stock plots, it rarely takes itself too seriously. It also employs interview segments with the title characters, which feels like just another way it stands out from the crowd. But what really holds it together is the characters. Zeke and Luther themselves have a great bromance, and the show actually does a good job showcasing their rise to fame, their skating careers being used for some surprisingly effective drama in a few episodes,
managing to continuously top themselves with their stunts.
Even if it feels like the focus is skewed a bit too much towards Zeke, with him getting most of the character development.
Still, they're both lovable goofs.
Kojo is a hilarious on and off rival, and the icing on the cake is the kooky cast of side characters surrounding them, played by some seriously talented actors. There's no name in favorites, they somehow all manage to be funny and memorable in their own right. Even the subplots.
I thought I wouldn't like the Ginger stuff, kind of like Crash and Bernstein subplots.
I don't know why these 12-year-old boy shows felt the need to have half the focus be on their female characters,
but I thought they actually complemented the Zeke and Luther plots quite well.
Even if she's just kind of a watered down Megan Parker. And Poochie always saying yay
was funny at first, but got old.
And Stinky Cass was also funnier as a one-off, I think. Still, I think the show kind of lost something when she was demoted to a side character in season 3. Besides that, I think the show largely got better over time, and it was already good from the start.
I can't believe I'm saying this,
but Zeke and Luther has replaced Crash and Bernstein as my go-to surreal buddy comedy from Disney XD. It's just that fun. But I knew from the start which show would be my number one. At first glance, Wander Over Yonder probably seems like a fairly stereotypical cartoon, which to some extent was by design. It was meant to be a throwback to the Looney Tunes in a world where even funny cartoons were taking themselves more seriously. Many episodes in season 1 revolve around Wander thwarting Hater through wacky schemes, or Hater's failed attempts to take him down. A classic cat and mouse formula. But Wander isn't Bugs Bunny.
Wander is a pacifist
who's always motivated by helping others. He's also not SpongeBob, as you might think. Unlike in SpongeBob and other cartoons with a similar dynamic, Wander's not an idiot. It's clear he realizes Hater's a threat and is nice to him in hopes of showing him the light. And he's voiced by Jack McBrayer, whose voice you'll probably find either incredibly endearing or incredibly annoying. I, for one, am in the former camp. Still, if Wander was the sole protagonist of the show, that could get exhausting. Thankfully, he's accompanied on his adventures by Sylvia, who complements him perfectly. It's wonderful to see how their personalities and philosophies clash, yet they still have a great respect for each other and rely on each other. But as great as Wander and Sylvia are, it still pales in comparison to the supreme awesomeness of the greatest villain in the galaxy, Lord Hater. I love this guy. Everything about him cracks me up. I tend to really enjoy comedic villain characters, and Lord Hater is no exception. And like a lot of them, it's shown that Hater's villainous acts are motivated more by insecurity than anything. Had the show gotten a proper finale, the logical conclusion would have been Hater turned into the good side. And I love his dynamic with his underling, Commander Peepers, who could probably take over the galaxy by himself, if only he didn't love Hater. These 4 characters make the show. Take one away and it wouldn't work. While season 1 is an all-around funny and likable cartoon, by the end it was getting a bit repetitive. So I think it was smart of them to completely flip the dynamic on its head in season 2 by introducing an actually serious villain in the form of Lord Dominator, and also putting more focus on Hater and Peepers,
to the point they can be considered the show's deuterogonists,
as it becomes increasingly clear that them and Wander and Sylvia are 2 sides of the same coin, an eccentric, impulsive goofball and his no-nonsense level-headed sidekick. A lot of shows of this era got bogged down by serialization and lore, but Wander keeps the plot straightforward and the backstories vague. It allows you to use your imagination. It really is a shame it got canceled. It's far from the worst cliffhanger I've seen. This list alone has many far worse, but still leaves you wanting more. Still, I don't know what they were planning with her in season 3, if anything, but I'm glad they don't redeem Dominator. It's such a bold choice for a show this optimistic to have a villain who rejects the hero's friendship, and are still able to show that evil doesn't fulfill her, and that she does desire companionship like anyone else, but her lack of empathy prevents her from forming meaningful relationships. And that's what really makes this show stand out, its optimism. Compared to Craig McCracken's previous shows, which very much have a bite to them that was common for kid shows of the era. A lot of times those shows ended on a sadistic punchline, but Wander doesn't do that.
It's to the point you could call it unrealistic how well things work out for the characters.
And it can get sappy, maybe too much for some people, but for me, it's just as much sap as I can tolerate. I love this show. Very few bring me as much joy, and I haven't even mentioned the animation or the music, the endless creativity. It's not just my favorite Disney XD show, but one of my favorite cartoons of all time. God bless you, Craig McCracken. So there you have it, my first best to worst network ranking, and of my favorite channel as a kid, no less. And despite all the shit I had to trudge through, in the end it was worth it for all the great shows I got to highlight. I got to revisit old favorites like Crash and Bernstein and Wander Over Yonder, and discovered some new ones like Zeke and Luther and Mighty Men, and through watching them all gained an even bigger appreciation for the network they came from, the one that came closest to becoming a fourth major player in kids TV, that also happened to come from the same conglomerate as one of the big three, but I digress. One of the last attempts at creating a cohesive cable brand, a safe haven for 7-year-old boys. And while yes, it was ultimately born out of corporate cynicism, I still get the sense that most of its creators were afforded more freedom than on the main channel. And for all these reasons, even long after it's gone, I will always love Disney XD. Feel free to tell me what other rankings like this you'd like to see in the future. I already know which one I'm doing next, but your comments will influence which ones I do sooner after that. I am the Cartoon Koala, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.